people and from institutions and other governments, but there's not enough of it. We can't get enough. We need another billion.
And we need it.
We need it. So the Federal Reserve officer says, no problem. He opens up his desk drawer and pulls out this big black checkbook. Of course, that's just a figure of speech. Actually, it's all done with computers.
It's a computer.
Yeah. But to visualize it, he opens up this checkbook, and he writes a check to the federal government for $1 billion.
Just hands it over.
He just hands it over. And the Secretary of the Treasury says, thank you very much. He takes it downstairs and deposits it into the checking account of the federal government, and now they have money, and they can start to write their own checks, and the process is underway.
And, of course, the deposit was made in that same bank that gave him the money, right?
Yeah, well, yes, or another bank. It really doesn't make any difference.
They're all the same.
It's all the same, yes. It's into the system. And now the question arises, where did the money come from? Where did the Federal Reserve System get that money? What account was it, and so forth? And the amazing answer is there is no money.
It was never there.
It was never there. It was created out of thin air at the point at which it was loaned to the Federal
Had the Treasury Secretary said, not $1 billion, but I need $1 trillion.
Same thing.
They would have written the same thing.
Exactly. And that is exactly where these trillions are coming from today that are being pumped into the economy.
All right, now, this is something then Ed, I don't understand. When we talk about poor third world nations, okay, they're living in squalor. They're in huts. They're living in the desert. Why don't they, through their banking systems, simply do the same thing?
Well, actually, they do. And you've seen pictures of some of these people from countries. They walk down the street with their arms loaded with billion-dollar notes to buy a loaf of bread.
But it's not worth anything.
It's not worth anything, and neither is ours. But the only thing is that
we have a perception it is.
We have a perception it is, and up until now, people have been willing to accept American dollars all over the world.
That's going to change.
That's going to change, yes. And it's going to change because people will finally, around the world, say, hey, we don't want this stuff anymore than we want the Zimbabwean note, you see. But anyway, so that's how the money comes into existence and is given to the federal government. And now we see why the federal government is in the partnership, because it's a much more convenient way to create money out of nothing than if the government turned on its own printing presses. That would be pretty obvious.
Why do they seem to be doing it now more than ever before? Why, the Bush administration came up with the $700 billion TARP program, of which they spent $350 they spent half of it, right? $350 billion. And the rest the Obama administration spent, and then some. Why haven't past administrations taken this huge amount of money and just thrown it around? Were they more responsible or not?
No, I don't think they're any more responsible, and had they faced the same situation that we're facing today, I have no doubt that they would have, because they have the same mindset. That's the only trick they know. They don't know the trick called restraint or private capital formation or saving your money. They don't know that trick. All they know is go print it, make it out of nothing.
Now, does somebody have to eventually pay this phony money back?
Well, yes, and I'm coming to that, George.
Okay.
You bet somebody has to pay it back, and you already know who it is.
Yeah, you and me and everybody else.
That's right, but let's see how it works. It's fascinating. So the first round of this process is the creation of money out of thin air to give to the government that end of the partnership. So now we see why the government's in it, because they can have access to any amount of money that they may need at any time.
Who wouldn't like that plan?
Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Okay, now, if you think that's interesting, the next step is even greater. It's more amazing than that first step.
All right, hold on. Let me sit down now.
All right.
Normally I do these things standing up, but let me sit down.
Let's follow some of that money and see where it goes. Let's take $1,000 of it.
Okay.
Let's say $1,000 is given to the guy that delivers our mail. And he has a government check now worth $1,000. He doesn't know that, 10 minutes ago that money didn't exist anywhere in the universe.
Right. Doesn't care.
Doesn't care. No, it's money. It's spendable. It's a government check, of course. It's a good check. So he takes it down the street to his private bank.
Yep.
And deposits it into his personal account. Now this money is out of the government side and into the private banking side, and this is where it really heats up. If I were a banker and this guy deposited $1,000 into my bank, I could stand in front of everybody there in the bank and say, "Attention, everybody! I have good news. This gentleman over here just deposited $1,000 into our venerable bank, and we now have money to lend." And everybody would applaud that because they know that the more money that's to lend, usually the lower the interest rate.
See, and I would say, wait a minute, I just gave you $1,000, but I put it into my checking account. That's my money.
Yeah, but he's not there anymore. he just left.
He thinks it's there, right?
He thinks it's there, yes. But the next guy over there says, but $1,000 isn't enough. I want $9,000 to buy this used car for my wife. And I guess you just can't lend it to me because I need $9, you only got $1. And as a good banker, I'd say, wait a minute, sir, don't leave. I can take care of your loan. And he would say, with $1,000? How could you do that? And I would have to say, don't worry about it. It's very complicated, and it's all well regulated.
But we'll take care of it.
We'll take care of it. Just sit down, sign the form, and so forth. And the truth of the matter is, I can lend him $9,000 based on that $1,000 deposit.
How? Leverage?
It's leverage. Yes, it's called fractional reserve. That's the real name for it.
They let them do that.
They demand that they do it. It's part of the scam, you see.
Did they always do that?
Always. From the very beginning of banking, it's been done that way, and nobody understands it except the professional bankers. You see, the Federal Reserve says...
A license to steal it.
It's a license to steal, but it seems so logical at the time. See, the Federal Reserve says that the banks only have to hold, let's say, 10% in reserve, and they can loan out 90%. Well, if we take $1,000 and call it 10%, then that's 10% of $10,000. We'll hold $1,000 as reserve. That means we can lend $9,000. It doesn't make any difference that we don't have it. We'll create it.
What happens if 500 people who put $1,000 in the bank that week all come to the bank and they say, hey, we want our $1,000 back?
Well, then the whole thing goes belly up, of course. Then you have a bank run. And the banks always assume that will never happen, or it'll happen so rarely that when it does happen, they'll just go to the Fed and ask the Fed to create the money out of nothing again, and cover the deficit. And that's how they play the game.
My God. Now, is there a domino effect here? At what point does all this collapse, Ed?
Well, we don't really know at what point. It's just amazing to me that it has gone on so long. But in approaching an answer to that, I'd like to deal with the first question that we put aside, which was who pays for this?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have the obvious situation here where for every $1 billion created out of nothing by the Federal Reserve and given to the government, that money now goes into the private banking system, and an additional $9 billion can be created out of another nothing. And what do we have here? A situation in which the banks now have loaned this money into existence, money that didn't exist. They've loaned it into existence, and now they're collecting interest on it, which means the banks are collecting interest on...
Nothing.
What a
deal. How can we do this?
Well, we can just open up a bank and become totally unethical and unscrupulous. We can.
They're making money on nothing.
On nothing, yes. And that's the way banking has been from the very beginning. Now, so who pays for all of this? With the expansion of the money supply in this fashion, you must remember that the money supply expands, it also contracts in the same way. When those loans are paid back, that money goes out of existence.
They don't like them paid back.
Oh, no. They don't want them paid back. They want you to keep paying and extending and rolling over and all that sort of thing because they make money on the interest on nothing. If you pay it back, all they're left with is the nothing. So they want that interest. So the point, though, is that the way the system works is that the money supply must continually expand in order to create the appearance of prosperity.
Ed, hold on for a second. We're going to take this quick break. We're going to come right back with you on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, we'll take your phone calls with Edward Griffin, the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. We'll be back with more, though, on Coast to Coast AM.